I'm almost all the way through with these team needs for the 2014 NFL Draft. I've got the AFC Conference champion Denver Broncos and one more video, the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. Thank God. Be glad to get done with this series and really get ramped up and ready to go for the 2014 NFL Draft. Roger Goodell pisses me off by the fact that he made us wait until the second week in May. Up yours, Goodell. Anyways, let's focus on the Denver Broncos, an organization that did a lot of great things over the past couple of years, but still has come up just a teensy bit short from the ultimate prize, which is a Super Bowl championship, which is what this team is constructed to do and do right now. Now, the Denver Broncos were very active in the offseason via free agency, bringing in guys like DeMarcus Ware and a TJ Ward and an Emmanuel Sanders and an Aqib Talib. The ultimate question for me is, did they really necessarily get a whole lot better? And as they sit there in Elway as the guy running the show in the front office has clearly said, rightfully so, too, as long as Peyton Manning's here, we have to go for it now because that window of opportunity shrinks very, very rapidly, especially since the history of Super Bowl losers making it back to the Super Bowl the next year isn't very good. It's been over 20 years since that last happened. History is not on the side of the Denver Broncos. John Elway got very aggressive in free agency, which was the right thing to do. But what it does do, to me anyways, from an organizational standpoint, is puts an increased focus and emphasis on the importance of the NFL draft for the Denver Broncos. You could sit there and talk about them being built to win now and all of this. They're still not a complete team. They still need more help, and they're going to need to find some help out of this draft class. But it's also going to be important down the road, too, because there are going to be some potentially disastrous salary cap considerations down the road and consequences for what they're doing now. So it's going to be important for the Denver Broncos to draft well here, so that way when that time comes where Peyton Manning does step aside, the bottom doesn't fall out of the organization. Now, in terms of the Denver Broncos, they've done a decent job in the draft over the past 3 years of finding some impact players all throughout the draft. You know, you look at Von Miller, their second overall pick in 2011. Sure, he didn't do much in 2013 between the suspension and the torn ACL, but he's been everything you could expect. He's been an impact player for that Denver Broncos defense his first couple of seasons. A guy like Julius Thomas, who was a fourth-round pick in that same draft. You have other players that have panned out nicely, guys like Orlando Franklin and Danny Trevathan and Derek Wolfe when he's healthy. There's some guys that have come to help the Denver Broncos in the recent draft. So yes, you bring in the Peyton Mannings, and yes, you bring in the guys like you bring in the guys like the Terrence Knightons, and you bring in the guys like the Wes Welkers and the Vasquezes of the world, what have you. But it doesn't hurt the fact that you already had key pieces drafted in place in 2012 and 2013, guys that were already in the fold like Demaryius Thomas and Eric Decker and Ryan Clady. You know, it doesn't hurt when you already have some of those guys in place. Problem for the Broncos, I think, is they have a lot of questions in terms of their recent drafts, too. Yes, they've had some big hits, but they have a lot of questions. They could get so much more out of the recent draft classes in terms of contributions, and I think it's going to be very important for them to do so in 2014. Guys like Raheem Moore and Nate Irving and Ronnie Hillman and Sylvester Williams and Monty Ball and Kayvon Webster are going to need to take that next step and become more and lived up to their high draft status that the Broncos have bestowed upon them in the past couple of seasons. Now, when you look at the Denver Broncos, they're kind of sitting, in a so-so position in the draft. They've got 7 picks, one in every round, so they're not sitting in a terrible spot, but they don't have a multiplicity of picks in any one round. They don't have a tremendous amount of draft currency and not a tremendous amount of attractive draft currency, if you will, or very valuable draft currency. And when you look at this, I think it leads up to this strategy for the Denver Broncos. I think it would be very wise for them. It would behoove them to try everything they can to trade out of that first round pick at 31. Try and find a team that's eager to trade up for a quarterback, or maybe a guy that is other guy at another position that has slid down that somebody really covets, and maybe the Broncos can peel back into the 8 to 14 range in round 2, and then maybe pick up an additional third round pick or a fourth round pick, if you will. Get out of that first round, because again, when I talk about what they've done in free agency the past couple of seasons, it could have some very dire salary cap consequences down the road, and as a result, they might not want to pay somebody 5 years of guaranteed money potentially of a first round pick. Maybe they only want to have a guy for 3 or 4 years potentially as a second round pick. But again, They don't necessarily need a ton of big time star impact talent. Where they do need help at, though, fortunately for them, in some instances, this draft is very deep in. And as a result, I think it's okay for them to trade out of that first round pick, not trade up, not stay put, but trade back and still be able to address those holes that they need to. They need to address some of those key needs early, though, and then focus on depth later. In terms of those key needs, I still think defense is a very big need for this organization. I think everybody would say that's obviously the case. Just watch the Super Bowl and watch the Broncos at different points at times throughout the 2013 season. Cornerback is still a big need. Yes, you brought in a kid to lead, but what else do you really have there right now for the Denver Broncos at corner? You've let Bailey go. He was way past his prime. Harris tore his knee up. You really don't have anything else there. So yes, you've got to lead, but you need somebody else. You need another guy that you could really count on as a starter at cornerback right away. They need help in the middle of their linebacking core. Sure, you might have a guy like Trevathan and a Von Miller, but you really don't have that captain of the ship. Wesley Woodyard was not a great option for them in the middle of that 4-3 Broncos defense. They need a more competent, capable 4-3 true middle linebacker than what they have currently on the roster, in my opinion. Then you go to the offensive side of the ball. They have some needs there, too. They need help on the interior of that offensive line. They need somebody that can step in and replace Zane Beadles and be at least as good, hopefully even better. They also could use some help at wide receiver. Not only did Eric Decker leave via free agency, and they kind of made a small downgrade in terms of bringing in Emmanuel Sanders, but you're talking about Wes Welker might not be in the fold past 2014. Demaryius Thomas, who knows with his contract situation, his contract will be up after this upcoming season. Are the Broncos going to be in a cap position where they are looking to have to pay Thomas and maybe a Julius Thomas and maybe a guy like a Von Miller? These are guys here whose contracts are either up or close to being up after 2014. It's going to be important for the Broncos to give Peyton Manning some more help this year and also be able to prepare themselves for the blow of maybe losing a Welker and or Demaryius Thomas heading into the next offseason. So for the Broncos, a good thing is they have a talented roster. The good thing for the Denver Broncos is they still have Peyton Manning, at least from a regular season standpoint. I'll stay away from the postseason digs, 43-8. They're going to need to use that 35 as a motivational tool. But in all seriousness, the Denver Broncos are a team that is positioned right now to win right now, and they have to do everything they can to do so. And if they can get 2 or 3 guys that could come in and contribute as rookies, the Denver Broncos can maybe take that next step and really truly be Super Bowl 49 champions or make it back to the Super Bowl at the very worst. But if they don't get a lot out of this draft class and some of those other prospects over the past few years, guys like the Moores and the Irvings and the Sylvester Williams, the Monte Balls, the Kayvon Websters, don't step up and don't produce more, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see the Denver Broncos get eliminated in the divisional or the championship round in the 2014 season.